Hello, my name is Fred Herzig, and this is my wife, Mary Beth DeGan Herzig, and we'd like to welcome you to our show, Some Pretty Good Pots and Paintings, here at the Moon Tree Gallery. All of the work that you're going to see here was produced by Mary Beth and I in our studio, Bridgeton Lane Studios in South Bend, Indiana. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background. I started making pottery in the 1970s after I had returned to Bloomington, Indiana, kind of looking for something to do after I graduated. I wasn't happy in the business world and was looking for something else, thinking about graduate school and gosh, who knows what. And I kind of fell into making pottery, took a class and started working with a master potter in the area, and found that I was really fascinated by the process of making pottery. My basic philosophy about pottery is pretty straightforward. I think of myself primarily as a craftsman, and my goals are to try to make pottery that is attractive and useful, something that someone would pick up every day, like a mug, for instance, and feel really good about drinking their coffee or tea out of a mug that has come out of our pottery. I think I really have two areas that motivate me. One would be traditional American pioneer pottery, which comes out of the English tradition of the English country potters, and you'll find those forms attract me. They're simple but incredibly practical and useful. They're fairly straightforward to throw. However, I do have a very fond place in my heart for Japanese, Chinese, and some Korean styles of pottery. And if you look at some of the bowls I've thrown, for instance, you'll find examples of the American style of making a bowl, but you'll also find the more conical, narrow-based, say a Japanese style bowl, which I certainly appreciate. The more interesting thing to me is that our pottery is really a collaboration. I do all of the wheel work, but Mary Beth does the hand building, and she does all the brushwork on the pot. So oftentimes what I'm doing in case of a platter is kind of making a canvas that I turn over to her, and then she finishes it and we glaze it together. But for the most part, the hand build things she does or the wheel thrown things that I have, we collaborate on the glazing and the firing process, and it's really a combination of both of our views of how we want the work to look.
We came together with this dream that we had always wanted to have a studio and have time to do our own work. I had been teaching for my whole life, the last 20 years or so, teaching art, and did my undergraduate work in art. So I considered myself a two-dimensional artist and worked a lot in drawing, painting, especially a preference for working in pastel painting, doing landscapes, doing figures. And about 10 or 12 years ago, I had a transition that my artwork started to reflect more my inner meditative self than my exterior view of the world. So I no longer found things in my environment that captivated my interest enough to want to move into recreating it on a canvas or on paper. What came from that is the need to start noticing the inner movement of my heart, my spirit, my feelings, and generate that. So if we're going to put it into a category, we probably would name it abstract expressionism. So my work is very meditative now. I started doing the work in graphite, which I have a large example of the early work that I was doing in graphite, and then moved to watercolor with it, do some pastel work in it, and I have some large acrylic pieces now that I'm working with it in. And my hope is that in the viewing, if you allow yourself a moment to pause and to settle in and let your eyes travel through my work, that somehow you will get an experience either of your own or that is triggered by the work that I've done from my own inner experience. And when I work on clay, I do think of the clay as being my own canvas. So I do make platters. Some of the large platters with handles you'll see are hand-built, or charcuterie trays that are hand-built that I've done. I do a lot of little tapas plates. And with them, you'll see the same pattern, movement, color that you'll find in my paintings and my drawings. So we have a tension between us of the two mediums. We have a tension in where we've come from. Fred comes from being a craftsman. I come from more of a traditional artistic foundation. So I'm pushing color and pattern. He's pushing form. And what comes of that is often quite interesting. Both in the dialogue that can get hot between us and the satisfaction that we have at the end of the day when we've been able to really collaborate and find a sense of consensus between us. So the work that's here has had to pass through the consensus. We want to thank you so much for coming to see our show. We love sharing it, and we'd love your feedback. And please come back often and bring your friends. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.